Hey, hi everybody, and welcome. Welcome to Movement Mentors number 55. 55. Wow. Okay, so it is the 15th of November, 2023, and today I am delighted to welcome all of you here, and in particular Nuno and Jeremy, who will really be facilitating our conversation starter today at Movement Mentors. So this started with an email that Gwen and I received from Nuno, who was really sharing with us how interested and engaged he's been with the work that Jeremy had been putting out on social media and such. Now, as we are starting to really encourage our trailblazers to step up and bring these questions, these conversations, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to say, hey, Nuno, Jeremy, come and bring this conversation to all of us. So without further ado, I am going to welcome you both here. Welcome Nuno, welcome Jer,
Yeah.
and ask Nuno to take over to begin the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Jeremy, for accepting it. Uh, actually, when I came to Biotensegrity, when I started listening to all these ideas, I'm a practitioner more than I love to study, but I don't do research or anything. So I study to and I get some idea that calls my attention, and I want to apply it to my job to see how it fits on what I do. But it's a lonely process because I see most people following some methods or techniques by the book, and they don't let other things color their practice. They do what they do, and they are what they are called, and that's it. So when I came to writing secretary, I started to apply what I could take from what I was learning, and the time goes by, and I see the bunch of uh, crazy things that I was trying because I wasn't understanding the right thing, and I'm always understanding differently, so I'm trying different things, but it makes sense to my work. But it's, as I said, it's a lonely process. And when I saw Jeremy online by chance on Facebook, um, promoting his work with pedagogy principles applied to singing, I said, "Oh, Jeremy is on biotensegrity and body biotensegrity, so he's talking more or less the same language, but in a completely different field for me. Let me see what he's saying." And I started reading his posts that he called his cornerstones, his principles, and I was like, I do these. Like this makes total sense. And I realized that he was doing and he is doing something that I think is not easy, which is organizing and putting it in words and systematizing ideas that run around our practices that we say, yes, we do that. Yes, yes, I already know that. But it's very difficult to put it in a systematic way, as I saw Jeremy doing it regarding the body, using his métier, singing, which makes total sense to any kind of other practice that we have regarding the human body. So that was my really call for the work that Jeremy is doing. And if you would like to I don't know, to say something, Jeremy, or present your principles so people can, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Great. I'm going to jump in here. Thank you, Nuno. And I agree. It is challenging to systematize. And so I'm really excited about this. Jared, to start, we've got newer trailblazers on that may not have met you. And I do encourage you to hop onto our platform and do an introduction there. But a really short introduction, I think, will be helpful for people.
sure. Yeah, my
Please.
name is Jeremy Ryan Mossman, and um, up until embodied biotensegrity in 2020, this amazing course that I took with Chris and many of the other folks who come to these calls. I was teaching in academia, teaching singing for mostly musical theater artists, undergraduate and graduate, and I'm also a yogi and 500-hour certified yoga teacher, and was learning about biomechanics in the same space as biotensegrity and trying to reconcile the two. And it was really actually a tremendous opportunity to get a bigger picture while I was working with graduate students, teaching them about the intersection of voice and movement. And it was quite a pain, a labor of love, because I knew in my soul that there was something very important about nonlinear pedagogy in the voice world, which is essentially teaching movement art, but for specifically for the voice, and that I had come from a place of linearity, and teaching people by telling them where to put their tongues or how to use their jaws or what to do very specifically with their body, and then feeling like history was repeating itself with every lesson. Why aren't they learning, essentially? And my graduate students, what aren't they understanding about this nonlinear aspect of teaching voice? And so it's been a really interesting spiral for me to understand and continue to understand better uh, how humans learn, how organisms shift into more efficient states, and so since I've left academia, I've started some programs for teachers to learn some different ways, different approaches that might be more in alignment with how organisms shift and how we actually learn, and so we don't experience that history repeating itself. And so when I started to market this program going into its second year in the summer, I really started to organize my thinking and differentiating between the things that we do and the things that we think, and those are really different. The interventions for movement, the actual cues that we would tell a student or tell a client might not be the same things as what our mental model holds dear. And so I started to draw these distinctions between the way I would phrase something to a student and how it's a part of a mental model of understanding the complexities of helping somebody evolve and move forward in from a habit that's not serving them towards habits that do. And so I created what I call pedagogical cornerstones, and I'm interested in sharing them, not to promote my thought leadership exactly, but to have some holes poked in them and to have some conversation around them, and grow them myself, because I'm a lifelong learner and I know that there's always more and more nuance and more understanding and more networking between these ideas. So I just created some slides with these pedagogical cornerstones, and I don't even know if that's what they are. That's just sort of the best way I could articulate them at the time. So when I revisit them again today, maybe I'll get more clarity. Maybe there's a hierarchy, maybe there's a hierarchy among them. So please feel free to stop me. I'm just going to go through some of these cornerstones. I believe there are 7 altogether, but we don't have to dump all 7 out to start a
Hmm.
conversation. So if there's something that you want to talk about, um, uh, put something in the chat or raise your hand or unmute. Y'all know the Zoom etiquette. So my platform is called Body Based Voice, and so these are just slides that I shared online in an email form with some more writing about them. But I think in this community that these will be more natural and won't need as much explanation. But please, I do hope to get some notes and some thoughts and challenges about all these. So these are in no particular order. I do think that they are hierarchical, but maybe they're not. So the first one that I have here is that our pedagogical framework is integrated rather than isolated. Thinking of the body in parts leads to using our body as if it's in parts. Creating images of wholeness leads to more integrated behaviors that reduce local fatigue and increase ease and efficiency. Instead of thinking in parts, we think in scales from inside out and outside in. And I think even that thought is a little bit different in my mind at this point in time about
I like
what
that,
scales
Jer.
are. Yeah.
Yes, this instead of thinking in parts, we think in scales from inside out and outside in. That's a way of phrasing this that is not something I've heard other people say. And yet, as soon as I see it, I read it, I hear it, it's like, yes. So I appreciate that.
You know, for a long time, I wondered about scale levels, and I had heard at scale levels so much in biotensegrity learning groups, but I kind of made up what they were, and I think what is meant by scale levels at this point in time is how, you know, quantum foam, or from quantum foam arises subatomic particles, from that arises atoms, arises molecules, arises cells, arises a form, and so those are all scale levels, where we microscope in or telescope out. And
Mhm.
I think, and thinking about scale levels, and what I've heard is, you know, one scale level talks to its neighboring scale levels, one up, one down. But I didn't really know that when we were talking about them when I was starting to learn about biotensegrity. And so I started to think, what is a scale level to me? And what is feeding back and what is feeding forward in creating artistic vocalists, and knowing that the way you express something is going to feed back on the way your body moves, and the way your body moves is going to feed forward on the way you express something, and the way you express something is going to feed forward to the way the audience receives it, and that's going to feed back to the way you express something. And so playing with those ideas of art and craft, I think arose this idea of scale levels that's reflected in that cornerstone. So I think that's kind of an interesting funnel where there's another funnel in the same
Mhm.
concept. So I'm fascinated by scale levels, actually.
Mm.
And as Nuno said as well, that what you're talking about, you're developing in the arena of body-based voice, but it really does apply to all that we do.
Hmm. Hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Sorry, I think that the great thing of principles, and to for me to understand what what a pedagogy was doing, was making the bridge between the concept, the science, and the practice. How I go from one side to the other, I need pedagogy, and that's exactly what you're saying. Exactly with these isolated, integrated, not isolated, for example, or traveling between scales. How do you how do you use this concept of there are multiple scales, there are no levels, no layers, blah, blah, and things have living things have these constitution in multiple scales that you can see. Yeah.
and in a way, you
It,
know, it's everything everywhere all at once. So we could zoom in the microscope at one aspect, and the system will shift and will evolve that aspect simply by turning the lights on. But that aspect isn't the whole thing, and the whole thing is happening in real time at all times. And so, and as you know, like what I do with artists, is often separated into different kinds of trainings that happen in disintegrated ways, but have to emerge together in performance. That technique is technique, and sometimes in a lesson we talk a little bit about art, but the end of the road is the art. And so how does art and technique, how do they work together?
Mm.
Because ultimately they have to be together. So at what point are we connecting them? Are we creating a relationship? And this to me is how biotensegrity, or tensegrity, I should say, how tensegrity can be a pedagogical model, because it's all these disparate ideas that are holding themselves together in tension.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Should I show the next one?
Please do.
yeah.
So this uh, probably goes without saying, but nonlinear versus linear, and I'll just read it. 3 reasons why a nonlinear approach is important. We learn through intention play and trial and error, which is a totally nonlinear process. Singing is movement, and movement isn't linear. And no matter how much we think we know, and you could replace the word singing with movement or whatever it is that you do and see how it fits, if it aligns. But no matter how much we know about the mechanics of blank, singing, movement, whatever, the magic in performance or in life unlocks and reveals what we don't know. That no matter how much I think I know about the body and what it does, how it moves to create singing, there is stuff that's between the things that I know. There's something magical in the way it comes together and self-organizes, that isn't knowable and maybe shouldn't be. Maybe there's something lovely about that, that it can take us by surprise. That when somebody is truly in a moment or in a performance or motivated to move in a certain way, um, based on an environmental constraint or an intention that they have, we can exceed our expectations of self. I love the sports coach Nick Winkelman, who wrote the book Language of Coaching, I think is the name of the book. And he uses running as an example, uh, um, to describe three kinds of cueing: internal, external, and analogous cueing. And so he uses running to say, like an internal cue, a cue to the body. If you dart your knees forward, how is that going to help your running? Versus an external cue between you and the environment: push off the ground. And so now we have two different ways of looking at improving our running. And the research favors the external cue, but the analogous cue that he uses is: there's a snake behind you and it's about to bite. Beat the bite. And you can only imagine how you would find out how well you can run if there's a snake behind you and you don't want to be bitten by that snake. Even I, who does not like running or practices running, could probably run pretty fast and for a long time. And so there's something about something that motivates the body to move versus a mechanical approach that presumes knowledge about how the body moves.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's very, very it's some all those principles are almost scary for the for a trainer, for a facilitator that is trained in the classical model of coaching, how to do etc. Because um, are you going to ask for money to play with people, to let them just explore themselves and see the results, to facilitate? It's for me, I also teach teachers, and it's always a scary moment when I say, okay, let it go. Just I give a cue or two and just explore, but I need to be there with my net to hold them following and standing and finding. And so it's a kind of a chaos. It's a mess that is installed, but it's where the, as you say, it's where the results are coming in pedagogical terms. I think that's the way to apply these nonlinearity approach to that we know life is has.
There's something about the emergent state or the emergent property of play surrounding an intention. And I often think about standing up as an example, and how standing up required falling down. And then we tried again, and then we fell down again. And every time we stood up in a slightly different way. And every time we fell down in a slightly different way. And we did it over time, and we did it with motivation and intentionality. And at some point, this emergent possibility arises where we can stand up and stay up. And it's not just standing up and staying up, it's standing up and staying up against the wind or against external forces. Or you could put a bag on your back and not fall down immediately. So there's a resiliency that arises through holding an intention and playing all sorts of ways around that intention to try to meet that intention. And then there is this emergence. There's this something that happens that might not be quantifiable exactly. And conversely, if I was to tell my leg muscles exactly what muscles to activate and when to stand up or to walk, I probably wouldn't have a more refined skill for the precision that I'm intending. I'd probably look pretty clunky to micromanage my muscles or the
Mhm.
idea of what I do and when.
Yeah. Can I just say something to what you just said about the playing and the falling and standing and falling and standing? for that to happen, or for me to allow, or someone to allow himself or herself to for that to happen, there needs to be a container of safety and yeah, safety around. So that's also a role that we, to implement this kind of pedagogy principles, you need first to create that empathy and that welcoming environment to allow people to allow themselves to fall and see what happens, and stand again and fall again and find themselves, to dive into this chaos, in these into this yeah, hole.
And it all counts. I mean, that's the thing, you know, you want to succeed at your intention, but when you don't succeed, it actually counts towards when you succeed. It's a part of the successful process to have failure. And I think I'm misquoting Neil Thies when I say, from quantity comes quality. You know, by trying the same thing
Mhm.
over and over again, eventually you discern better pathways, better possibilities to get yourself to that intention. And so this really speaks to a linear process where we say the way to do something is by doing this. If you want to do this, you've got to do this. And if we have one possible way of getting to an outcome, that's really fragile. There's no resiliency or super stability or anti-fragility embedded within that. And so it's almost like we're waiting for it to fall apart because there's not enough juice, there's not enough data, sensory information to be able to withstand any unexpected event. And I see this all the time. And I watch, you know, concerts of Broadway performers that are performing in Times Square on a rainy day, and they don't sound great always. And it's amazing to me because they're the best in the field. But when you take them out of the theater and it's not 8 p.m. at night and the weather conditions are a little different, it's like they can't access their brilliance. The brilliance is within a certain time frame, a certain space, a certain sound system, and so they don't necessarily have adaptability written in their brilliance.
Mhm.
You know, if I, oops, wait a minute. Am I?
You're here. You're good, Diane. We can. Oh, now
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Yes, yes. That adaptability, these are such interesting ideas, Jeremy. Really, really interesting ideas. That adaptability comes from tools, movement tools that you get. And you do that before you want to sing. It's before you want to run, before you want to do these other things. You need the tools. You need that underground, that deep whole body organization that comes, that you can get. And it has not to do with your skill, the skill of the thing you're trying to do. It has to do with how it all works together. And that can be not that's not a style of moving or a style of voicing. It's not a style. It is an organization of the body, and you can get that from tools. They are it's wonderful to see a group of people that has these tools, and they are absolutely clear about what it is you ask them to do. It's pretty exciting to see. And okay, anyway, I could go on, but the whole notion of tools, preparing the body with tools. And there are many different tools. I use Bartanian fundamentals. But this is what we have to go to if we are intending to create the potential that's in there. It has to have the tools. Okay.
I agree. I agree. And that's sort of the scale level, if you will, um, that hovers under this, right? Like these are the sort of the mental model. I think these
Yeah.
pedagogical cornerstones are part of the mental model from which the tools emerge. It's the organization of the thinking so that the interventions
Oh,
and the tools can come from a place of holism and in a way that aligns with the complex adaptivity that we have at our disposal. What's the word? Disposal. And I think just before you logged on, I was talking about how um, when I was creating these cornerstones, I was really, sort of dumping out what do I know and what do I think and what's the difference between what I would say to a student as a tool, an offering to a student as in terms of a strategy, versus where's that strategy coming from?
Oh, good question. Really, really good question. Yes. The runner example is really a very good example, okay? Because it's something we can all imagine and think about and all of that. And we've probably all tried a bit of it or more of it, whatever. So yes. Anyway, let's see some more of your slides.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. I'm also, I think you also missed. I'm hoping to learn more and have some holes poked and to um, get even clearer about what this is all about. This is a reflection from this summer, so I think even now there's a bit of a different angle. So
Mhm.
intuition over intellect, and again replace the verbiage and see if it aligns with what you do. But we know what we know as voice teachers goes way beyond our intellect, and some of the best teaching moments come from out of the blue. A brand new idea bubbles to the surface, and we try something daring. These moments can be transformative, both for the student and the teacher, actually, and they come from an intuition. You've studied the voice, now let senses be your guide.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's easy to stay restricted into knowledge, into logic. It's easy and safe to be there, and it's safe for students, and that's really a learning curve to help a student go from something that is very, very safe for them to do because they can rely on it because it makes sense to them, where I don't think the body runs on logic, and so they wind up finding the end of that tool where every time if I hit this roadblock, if I apply this strategy, then I won't have the roadblock, but eventually they find that the strategy runs out of magic, the law of diminishing returns.
Mm. Mm.
And they come off stage and they go, oh, I was so in my head. All I needed to do was lift my soft palate more, or I didn't get the breath where I needed it. And they go to something that's logical. And it might have been a solution for them in the moment, but they were in their heads and not in their bodies. They weren't in their senses, they were in their minds. And
Mhm.
that's not where we want to be as movement artists.
No, the body has to be ready. The
Hmm.
body has to be ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear from you, Jer, and from Camilla, and from everybody. What types of things are you doing to create that container, that sense of safety and curiosity that helps people who are so ingrained in moving by the rules, following the intellect, trying to do what's right? That's what our culture fosters. And in this community, I believe, I mean, I'm seeing your slides and agreeing with what you're putting out there, the importance of play, the like the magic that comes when we shift into presence, when we follow that intuition, as you're calling it, call it the sparkles. How are people cultivating that safe place, that container, so that people will take these risks? I'm interested in hearing from Jer and from everybody.
Go for it, Jer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm lucky probably because I work with people who went to theater school and had to do a lot of really silly things already and make fools of themselves. And so I'm blessed to be able to take advantage of that, where I think, other folks might not want to go down an unknown pathway as well. But it's all a learning curve. Somebody might be really eager to go and do something daring, and somebody else might want to stay more reserved. So I think there's a lot of power in saying, can we try something weird? Let's try something weird today. Let's just see where it goes. And if it captures their curiosity, they'll stay on the path, I think. You know, if you can appeal to their sense of play and wake that up in them,
Mm.
then I think there's a more of a likelihood that they'll get curious about why they're getting curious. And they will start to bring in play in their own way. I had a student just yesterday who said, "Okay, so I was playing with this and I was exploring that and that led me to this and then I started to think about that." And I'm just thinking like this person is going to figure it all out. They're going to crack their own code because they're allowing curiosity to be their guide. And for me in the singing world, the only wrong thing that could happen or bad thing or less than good thing is if it feels more tiresome. If it feels like the path they're on is leading them to vocal fatigue, then let's try another path. But isn't it good that we know that this path is leading you to vocal fatigue? And now we can discern that path from another path. But if we never go down a path where it's going to fatigue you, we'll never know what will fatigue you. And so I think there's such a lovely openness that we can embrace and um, and I model it, and I think that's a part of the safety is that I'm in it too, and I'm happy to know what I don't know and share the mysteries and the wonderment with my students. And when they say, "Why did that work?" and I say, "I don't know, I have some ideas, but let's explore it in this way." And so we're holding each other's hands down a path together a little bit in the dark, and together we arrive in some light, and it just gets lighter and lighter until we see something that could resemble even knowledge or logic, but it arose from our form, it arose from our awareness and our sensations as our guide. And so we can create some sort of linear knowing to a degree through our experiences, and that I think is very powerful, that kind of bottom up knowing versus a top down muscling our mind into our matter until it's moving like the machine that we've imagined ourselves to
Mm.
be, as opposed to a free flowing organism that has lots of pathways as a non deterministic system. I don't know if that was a direct answer to the question, but that's
No,
all right.
it was beautiful, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is more of a sense of integration when it happens that way from, as you say, the bottom up rather than from the intellect.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
How are you
I don't
creating
have the
that
same
safe container?
experience as Jeremy with my some of my clients, yes, because they are with me for 10 to 15 years already. So they are thrilled when I come up with something. They will do something different, and it's the same thing, but with just a different mindset like, and they just love it. They love the presence. They need to be in the session with me, and they mention it. Yes, I this requires a lot of presence. This class is a lot of presence. Okay. But most people that I get, they come either from doctors send them to me to do Pilates because they need to strengthen their back muscles or their abdominal muscles or their muscles, I don't know, their glutes or something. And they want to feel that. Otherwise, they are not having what they are paying for, what they suppose they're paying for. And it takes a lot of time. And also people that are okay and come from the gym, normal fitness centers, they want to do Pilates. I don't know why, but they want to do Pilates. They have money. Um, and they want to feel what they are used to feel in the gym when they do sports. No mind, just music and boom, 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 sweat and everything. So it takes some time for me to hold them in my arms. I only do private classes, so it's kind of easier. Uh, and say that it's okay to do mistakes and it's okay to just it's okay. And I know that my conversation has to be with it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And most of them, I would say that 80% of them, the new one that comes in the first classes after some many okays, they burst in tears, men and women, in it's always because they just say, why I'm so emotional now? What is this? What have you done to me? I've done nothing. You're done. So I think it's not easy to. People have a lot of agendas when they come, and expectations when they come to my practice as a Pilates teacher, as a movement practitioner, and they want to feel some things, and they are expecting to leave some things through the session. And before I used to say that I had to give some of what they want and then give some what I want, but I no longer do that, because either they want to stay with me and I pet them and I hold them and I give them support, or they find it too much and they just vanish and go away to their gym or to whatever, to the neighbor that works differently. And it's okay. But it's not easy to set them to play and to change their minds.
Wow, that must be transformative
Yeah.
to actually come and think you're getting exercise and then suddenly be in a sphere where however you show up is okay. And by the response that people are giving, that sounds like it's a new thing for many, many people.
Yeah. I think this approach
then,
that we yeah. No, sorry.
I was just going to say, and then how often does it happen? I'm sure that all of you experience this in your own work. People come, they think they're coming for fitness or some physical thing, or in your case, to learn how to sing in a certain way, or to improve their singing capabilities, when it really is a somatic and psychosomatic experience that has the power to change so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's also part of the paradigm shift, personally. Go ahead, Diane. And hi, Susan. Lovely to see you.
It's about changing the definition of the work that you're doing, or any of us is doing. That it isn't the idea of exercise, the idea of fitness. People are kind of stuck with what it is, and it's in a little box. And it doesn't have to do with the body as a whole. It has to do with fragments of the body. And somehow that's supposed to get you where it is you want to go. A lot of people in the first place don't know where they want to go anyway. But we really have to rethink those words that we use. They are not very useful. They're not very useful. They are not about working with the integrated body. They're not about tools. They're about a program that has been set out for them, and that they recognize it. Sometimes if they don't recognize it, it's confusing. But you can help them recognize it by going to the movement in a different way, which you are doing. It's a big topic. It's a big topic of this exercise thing, and it's generally not very useful because we've been stuck with it for a long time. We've been stuck with biomechanics for a long time.
And I think that's why to have someone defining pedagogical principles, links between the concept and the practice is so important, because this is all very emotional, this practice and this relation with the persons, and we can confuse ourselves in that if there are no set or guiding at least cornerstone principles, as Jeremy had devised so well in my aesthetic. Okay, go on.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else want to say anything about how you're creating that container of safety with other people, or do we want to move on? Go ahead, Camilla.
I agree with Nuno completely. And I was thinking about this a lot, what it is when the magic happens. It's certainly not the amount of knowledge I share with people. And I think it's the acceptance that the person feels accepted as they are, whoever they are, whatever they do, just this. I think that's the it's okay Nuno was saying. And I have same experience that people in this simple moment, they start to cry. And it's making me emotional what a hole we have in the whole healthcare system, or like taking care of people, because it's something so basic. I certainly was not taught this at school. And as Chris says, it's about change. It's almost like we are changing the way of teaching, or I'm sorry, I don't remember how you said it, but I just made a presentation where I put a lot of effort into it. And basically in the end, I saw it, it was just like 10-minute presentation or so. And there was a bunch of pictures of nature and playful tetrahedrons. And I was thinking like how deeply it is set in my mind that something to be valued, even from my mind, even though I know I learn the best from these things, that it has to be something where it's like bunch of mostly letters, sentences, and citations from studies and science evidence-based stuff, where I know when I listen to someone presenting this way, I stop paying attention. I'm falling asleep, and in the end, I feel like an idiot because I just don't get it, or I don't understand some of those things, and I just don't get the whole concept. So coming back to the simple stuff, I'm making always like a long round around the topic, but just creating the feeling safe, it's something so basic and accepted. But I feel like in order to do that, I have to come from this position here, and that's not something we are taught. And even like it's not what we learn. We are supposed to know everything, we are supposed to answer everything correct, and we are supposed to be smart. So this needs certain self consciousness, I would say, or self-awareness, and it's not easy. And sometimes I feel like I'm getting back to the old pattern. And so thank you guys so much. I'm taking so much from this conversation. It feels amazing. Susan. Oh, sorry. Carol.
It reminds me of a kind of a principle in teaching that unfortunately a lot of people who are teaching don't apply, which is that you have to meet the learner where they are. So you're giving someone an experience, even if you're just doing something, I think even if you're doing therapeutic work that isn't regarded as educational conventionally, having received some of that work, it is very educational. It's why I sought out craniosacral and other therapies when I was getting my master's in kinesthetic learning, because you're learning when you're getting a treatment. And so if the teacher doesn't meet the learner where they are, and instead they kind of take this, you come to me, I taught it to you. If you didn't get it, that's not my fault, it's yours. That's not your teacher. That person's not teaching. They're pontificating. I don't know what they're doing. They're not teaching, because they're not There's no teacher-learner exchange point, which is a very critical thing. And you can't do it unless you make that connection. Nice visual, Camille.
Go ahead, Carol. Unless Camilla wants to respond first. Go ahead, Carol. Thank you, Susan.
Well, I just want to say that just listening to this, just listening to Jeremy and listening to Nuno, listening to Diane, listening to Camilla, has moved me so much. And I've been lifted. I think Diane used the word, or maybe Jeremy, transformative. There's a sense in which we move out of an expectation. We've been taught since we were little what to expect in a learning situation. And something so powerful by its energetic presence can move us off that center. And we don't, if we're open enough, we don't get defensive. We don't put our hands up and say, but. And I think Camilla's question is really a good one about safety. And I'm remembering now the very moment that I transformed my understanding of what I was there to do as a Barnes manual therapist during my skill enhancement. And a skill enhancement is a week-long clinical where we treat patients with John and with skilled master clinicians. And what I realized was that I had spent 25 years being afraid of making a mistake, going into patient care experiences in fear, anxiety. And all of a sudden, I was not afraid anymore. And I knew I couldn't make a mistake because I adopted a new framework. And I didn't understand it, but I knew how good it felt. And then I almost immediately, when I was back home, driving across the causeway to class, to teach a class, I said to myself, I want that now when I go in to talk to these students. I want to not be afraid. I want to model that behavior of curiosity and excitement. And so I just transformed my whole teaching style from, well, I wrote the book, so I used to have them read the chapter and then we'd talk about it. And I didn't do that anymore. I asked them to read the chapter. I gave them a couple of questions that I thought would be key in on the important stuff. And then I got them into small groups and talking to each other about the material. And it was material on interaction. It was the course that I was teaching at that point was communication skills. It was called dealing with difficult situations. And I wasn't afraid anymore because I knew that whatever came up was grist for the mill, was just going to be what we dealt with that day. There were some who didn't like it. They had expectations, but I just was present for them too. Mostly they were pleased that they didn't have a final exam. But I transformed in that moment to becoming a better teacher. And I think safety is huge because I felt safe in that moment. I felt safe no matter what came at me, that I always anticipated I'd have to be prepared to handle. That no matter what came at me, somehow, because I had been transformed. I was in a different space as a teacher. as a facilitator of what came up between us rather than the book that I wrote, the learning from the book that I wrote. And the last, I think, 10, 15 years of my teaching in the academy was so much more pleasurable because of that experience that I had. And there are many times that people who take these courses with John, they come out and they say, it made me a different person. It carved me out to lead a better life because of the principles. And the basic principles that I take from that are resonance and being present in the moment, embodied presence in the moment. You can't be successful doing this work without that. And when we take that to life, go to the barrier and wait, be like a curious cat. If it feels like you're working too hard, you're working too hard. Those gems that he tosses out are life principles, guiding principles. And the emergence that comes from them is a kind of a willingness to be brave, to not be afraid. And then, as Nuno said so beautifully, and this brought tears, if they're not comfortable being in my arms, they can go next door. There's always someone that will meet their needs. And I get the longest letters from the ones who really had trouble in school, but now are out practicing and saying, oh, I just wish I would have listened to you. And this is life. But I just want to thank you for such a moving conversation. I apologize for coming in late. I had 10 people downstairs that just left. So now here I am. So, and that was lovely too. So it's always good to be here.
Thank you, Carol.
I would love to be in your arms any day, Nuno, when I do Pilates especially, or anytime.
Shall we go with the next slide, Jer?
Sure. I think this is in alignment, considering the conversation we just had about experiencing a lot, explaining a little, and instructing if necessary. How we learn key skills like walking and talking, most of us, without explanation, and the way we learned helped them stick. Providing nourishing sensory experiences that help the subconscious homeostatic system self-organize into more efficient patterns and save time and energy. Lessons are more fun, student-led, and spontaneous. I think that really speaks to what Carol was just talking about, the resonance.
Can I just say something? Not specifically related to these cornerstones that you just presented, but one thing that called my attention was first the reading of your cornerstone, because I read them on Facebook first. It was just the reading of them, but then I did your small teaser course that you offered, and I experienced you putting them in action, which is something that most people they are beautifully speaking about the principles and how they do it and how they think, but you apply them. You make I'm going to use silly exercises with a voice, and maybe you can show us some, just a little trick or two where one of these principles is being shown, one of your tricks from the sleeve, because they are so simple and so evident. That's the word that I find in English. It's like, oh yes, yeah, of course, it's of course. because you can show them in practice.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
would also like to see some showing in practice, if you would like to. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things that I've recognized as I've, gone from a teacher who wanted to understand to a teacher who's starting to understand and seeing a bigger picture, is that the interventions or the tactics, the actual things I would ask a student to do are really, really simple. There's nothing complicated about it. It just provides a new opportunity to feel, which provides maybe a new potentiality for the voice or for the body or for effort, the sensation of effort. And that's so much of what it's about. But the ideas are really simple, and they have to be simple because otherwise they can't be useful, and they won't
Mm-hmm.
motivate the student to practice. But if it's something that's really simple that gives them something valuable to experience, then they're going to want to go and experience it again. And through their desire to go and engage more, they'll also wake up their plasticity and their adaptability, and they'll see something new in the same simple something that they didn't see before. And by simple, I mean like, just put your weight on your feet, or have a smaller space in your mouth or a larger space in your mouth. Something that's just so simple, so accessible, um, that it's an offering. It's an offering for them to put pieces together on their own, create more meaning of their own. And that's, I think, a really lovely reflection process too. Because if I don't tell them what to do, and I just ask them to try something out, then they reflect back to me, and I learn about how they feel and what they think and how they process. And I can better help them build up their own internal meaning if I know those things, if I sense those things from the student reflecting back to me. And that to me, I think, is more powerful than giving them a right answer. And I think there is such a thing as stages of learning, that some people are in more cognitive stages of learning, and we want to help them get to more autonomic ways of doing so that they don't have to be in their, in their minds and always be micromanaging some aspect of their doing. But I think that that's part of the flow, and there will always be maybe some aspect of cognitive influence. And I think of it like that classic clip of Charlie Chaplin going to pick up the hat, and how he goes to pick up the hat and the hat keeps going further away from him, and he picks up the hat and the hat keeps going further away from him. And that's like the goal, right? Every time I think I'm about to get the goal, another goal emerges right on the horizon. And because there's always another goal motivating me to go and reach for it, I don't necessarily recognize that I'm reaching goals as I'm seeing the next one emerge. And so it's, I think, a Steve Jobs quote where you can only connect the dots looking backwards. You can't connect the dots
Mm.
looking.
Mm.
Mm.
Show us some fun, Jeremy.
Hmm?
Show us some fun exercise, please.
Oh, I don't even know what to do. There's
Oh,
hmm?
you just did several things. You mentioned several simple things already, right? Something, a couple of things in the mouth. Your something about weight, using your weight, feeling your feet on the floor.
One of my favorite things that I've been exploring lately with some students, and it still is such a wonderful mystery to me, and so I think influenced by something Susan said several months back when I was talking about something, and she said, "Well, it's got to come from the floor." And so to help people, give them an image that they're either standing, if they're standing, or sitting, if they're sitting, in drying concrete, and unsticking their foot or their sits bone from concrete that they're sitting in or standing in, and to be able to try to unstick their sits bone and then unstick their other sits bone, and try to really like get that sits bone to be unstuck from that drying concrete, and to just feel how just this image of trying to unstick this one sits bone engages in me. It engages a sense of push and pull at the same time, and it depends on where I shift my focus. That I'm unsticking my one sits bone, pulling it up, pulling, and I feel it moving through my whole form. Wherever I put my attention, I can feel my whole self engaged in this intention to unstick this sits bone. And if I shift my focus to my other sits bone, I feel, oh, I'm actually pushing into the chair here, and I'm pulling here, and I'm pushing here. And if I'm able to shift my mind's eye towards my vocal tract, which isn't even necessary, vocal tract being the spaces above my vocal folds, my larynx and my throat, so my mouth and spaces in my throat and my nose, I can feel how they're lighting up as well. They're a part of this effort, this global effort
Hmm.
to unstick my sits bones and engage in this push and pull with the chair or with the ground, whether I'm sitting or standing. And I have a student who I did this with a few days ago, and he was so upset with me that it was very effective because he didn't understand. He did not know what happened and why it happened, and I couldn't give him, well, it's because X, Y, or Z. The maybe best and most concise I can do is, when we are better supported by the ground, our internal support systems don't have to work as hard. And I even feel an increase in resonance in my own speaking voice for having done that for a few moments. And so there's this lovely mystery on the table, and there's part of me that doesn't want to know, and there's another part of me that really wants to know.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
like with the
great.
head, so you don't have to be afraid that you'll figure it out. It's like with the head. Charlie Chaplin's, I mean.
Right, exactly. It'll get clearer and more interesting as time goes on. I'm sure this concrete image will evolve.
Can I, this whole thing about using the ground, right? It's so interesting. There's your ground reaction force, right? Which to me is has a quieter signal. And if you look at Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, okay, so two amazing dancers. They are using the ground so differently. Where to me, when I look at Gene Kelly, he is the ground. He is being the ground the whole time. So like, where is the floor? It's at the top of his head. He's very yin, it's the earth. And Fred Astaire is using the buoyancy of the ground reaction force. His like, you can't understand how light he is. And they're both doing incredible things with the thing that kind of grooves them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they both, of course, use the other piece, but I just contrast those when you get a chance. It's really interesting.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry to come in late. So the ground and the air, all those things, those forces, the experience teaches us. Jeremy, is that line yours that you have in the purple? Instructive, necessary, or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah,
Ex-
experience a lot, explain a little, instructive, necessary.
That's so brilliant. Is that
Yeah.
yours?
Yeah.
I want to steal it. That's fabulous.
Thanks. Should I go on to the next one while I'm here?
Yes, show
Yeah,
us more
please.
fabulous things.
Seek comfort and befriend your habits. When we aren't comfortable, our focus goes to where we aren't comfortable. When we are comfortable, we gain resources for working with our habits, guiding them towards more effective and efficient possibilities. Prioritize comfort to enhance awareness of sensory shifts. And I think we talked about this before the call actually started, but these all, my study of biotensegrity and fascia and pedagogy and complex adaptive systems is really my attempt to understand what I was experiencing in my Feldenkrais training, which had to be paused for the pandemic. And so it's just been like a voracious hunt to understand the effectiveness of a Feldenkrais lesson and the mystery that's behind the scenes. And so there's a lot of talk about habits in Feldenkrais, and scaling down your behavior to be able to work at a level of comfortability, where your mind's eye and your sense of self is so much more illuminated because there's so much less noise between you and your awareness. And they talk about the Weber-Fechner law, which explains why when the room is so quiet you can hear the ticking of the clock so loudly. Or if there was no light in the room and you lit one candle, it would light the whole room. But if the window was open and the sun was shining and your light was on and you lit a candle, it would be pleasant but not provide a lot of light, for the room. And when there's a static noise, you're talking to somebody, the ticking of the clock doesn't exist anymore. And so it's the ratio, it's the proportionality of our ability to perceive a stimulus. And so I think a lot about how we can scale down the things that we do to be able to perceive how we're doing them. And I did a whole thing last week with my teacher crew on creating relationships between actualizing, physicalizing, and conceptualizing, and how we can create a tensegrity, essentially, of those three ideas, where I can actualize, for my context is singing, I'm actually doing the thing, or I can turn my singing off and just physicalize my singing like a lip sync. And that, let me tell you, turning the voice off, like, it's crazy how effective that is, just to strip away the actual act and perceive the behaviors, and how much internal intelligence starts to show itself. That when I turn my voice off but I'm pretending to sing, all of a sudden I feel like, oh, there's so much more space here that I never knew about. Or my breathing happened in such a way that I wasn't perceiving before. So it's a combination, I think, of my body's ability to already know how to do the thing I want to do, but when my voice is off, my habits aren't there, competing with that feedback loop that I can tap into because I've turned down the effort, just gotten into sense of self.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's fascinating, and I did a little research on the science of imagination, is that when you close your eyes and imagine the thing that you're struggling with, you can still imagine the struggle there. And so the habit is even in the image of doing. And that can be a really comfortable scale to start to work with the image. And even that can be threatening to some people. And so we want to dissociate it and imagine it outside of ourselves, like even inside of our own imagination, in ways we can work with the image of ourself. We can sometimes still struggle. So we can take it outside of ourselves, and we can even imagine it's somebody else or watch somebody else do it. And that creates a feedback loop to our own self-image, if that's our intention. So it's a fascinating, to me, scalar way of finding a comfort so that we can not have to keep butting up and competing with our habits, but create a collaboration with how our mind sees our behaviors and go, oh, that's really interesting. When I imagine myself doing that thing where my voice cracks, I imagine my voice cracking still. It's still there. It's not just in the out loud version. And so I go, okay, well, voice, what would it be like to not crack there, or to feel more XY or feel more ZA, and start to work with the image of it, and then build a bridge from the concept to the physical to the actual. And maybe exploring the actual makes me want to go back to the physical, or makes me want to go back to the conceptual, and create this push and pull between how I imagine myself doing, how I feel myself doing, and how I'm actually doing.
With this, what comes to my mind there is when I tell someone that it needs to be comfortable, many people do, like, for example, sitting. That's like everyone does that a lot. And they do this like this is comfortable. And then there is this like moments of defining what is the new comfortable, because I feel like we don't feel ourselves enough to know what's comfortable and what's just like passively being placed on the surface. Wonder if you have experience with distinguishing that or guiding people towards it.
Yeah, it's a huge discernment between what's familiar and what's efficient. And what's familiar is going to feel better. Even if objectively I know it's not ideal, you know, I can stand in one hip habitually and it's going to feel better than placing my weight on both of my feet, which will have a limited shelf life if it's not my habit. And so I think that's the time and place for somatic education. Because what's familiar is always going to feel less threatening, even if objectively I know it's less efficient. So it's a discernment process, I think.
No.
And that goes back, I think, to the last cornerstone of experience a lot. You know, it's through experiencing a lot of possibilities that the system can self-organize and wants to move towards efficiency, energy conservation. So we keep showing it more possibilities in that with that intention, and I think can rely on the brilliance of our subconscious homeostatic systems to take us there, to get us there. There's only one direction our systems want us to go in. So if we continue to show it possibilities that include more efficiency, I think we can get out of its way.
More slides?
Sure. I think there's two more. Construct awareness first, clarify movement second. At the time where I was creating these, I was doing a book club on David Lasondak's Fascia, What It Is and Why It Matters. And so I was very moved to read about a 3-to-1 ratio of sensory to motor nerves in many of our muscles, and the priority we have embedded within us to be aware of ourselves as a precursor to moving ourselves. So I just write, if you don't have a sense of something, you won't move it well. And I experienced that a lot with students where I tell them about something to move and they didn't really do it all that well. And it was because there was a missing piece there, is they weren't sensing themselves. They weren't sensing what they were trying to do. They didn't have the concept. They were just given a prompt to go and move something that wasn't on their body's map. And sometimes just gaining awareness is all that's needed. You know, it does the job to just turn the lights on.
Can you give an example of what you would do in that situation?
In a situation of like,
You've asked them to do something and they don't have the sensory awareness.
right. You know, if the I just need a context like the soft palate, which is a big deal in singing, right? It's the doorway between the mouth and the nose. And when the soft palate is more functional, resonance comes easier. And when there's more resonant energy, acoustic energy, free energy, like what happens in the bathroom, we don't need as much muscular energy. And when there's less muscular energy, there's less breath energy needed. So to just be able to tune up the vocal tract, which I think actually aligns with one of Sharkey's tuning pegs, similar region, a lot of things happen on their own. A lot of self-organization, systemic shifts will happen spontaneously. And it's hard to get a sense of this flap at the back of your mouth. We can touch it with our tongues to a certain degree. If you slide the tip of your tongue from your top teeth towards the back of your mouth, you'll feel where the hardness of your hard palate becomes a softness, a little tissue that flaps down there, which you can also feel if you snort. And you can feel something flapping away back there, tickling your throat. And you can also maybe sense it from above if you pay attention to the coolness of the air as it moves through your nostrils as you breathe in and out of your nose. And through breathing through your nose, you might feel like one side is cooler than the other side. And so you could maybe sense that there's an imbalance in your soft palate. And then you can take the image from one side, the side that is receiving more air, more coolness, more movement, and imagine it on the other side. And even talking about it, I feel my voice shifting. And I've got a very sensitive system because I work with this regularly. And so this is the learning curve that I help my students get on, where they just need to flip a switch in their awareness and their body goes, ah, thank you for that new update. Like how we update our iPhones, and the commands work better, right? We can refresh ourselves and our sense of self, and it will do the work for us.
Can I say, I also love those moments when I give an instruction to a student and they do something that to my mind is like, what on earth are you doing? It's got nothing to do with what I've asked for. And my first reaction has that flavor to it. And then I've trained myself over time to say, okay, huge opportunity here. What an amazing moment, for me to learn, for me to explore, for other things to happen based on, because if one person doesn't get what I'm saying, maybe it's how I'm delivering it, maybe it's whatever their experience is. Of course, it's somewhere in between. It's some magical, mystical combination, but this is my opportunity as a teacher to learn what's going on there, and that can open up very unexpected territory. I'm sure you've had it happen to you, Jeremy, in terms of what you do next as the teacher.
So many presumptions about what our students know or how they interpret something. And so I think it's a great opportunity, like you're saying, to just say, do it this way, or try this, like, and I could say be brighter or be darker or use more air or whatever. I could say anything, and it's an opportunity for me to go, oh, that's interesting how they interpreted that, and then I learned something about them, and then I asked them a question about that, and we're in a dialogue, and it's an improv session, and the improv session sort of builds a weave, and we create something, and who knew where we were going to go, but we get somewhere really interesting and really valuable, and we learn something about one another, and it's a real organic process of not knowing, which is so scary but so wonderful. And like Carol was saying a few moments ago, to bring in that kind of openness, I think allows for so much real stuff to happen, instead of the stuff that's in the expected, the rules, or the textbook of first you do this, then you do that, then you do the other thing. And the reality is there's so much that's metaphorical and interpretive that we don't know. When I say soft palate, my student could be thinking their ear. I have no idea, so I get to find out by not expecting that they're going to get it right. Actually, this I'm just going to go right to the next one because it, I think, talks right to it, that over time we expect adaptations with no expectation. Right? We don't know how something's going to evolve, but we know it's going to, and we don't know what direction, but we can certainly nudge it through constraints if we have certain goals that we have to meet. And constraints like constraint-led approach, which I love Rob Gray and the Perception Action podcast and his books like How to Optimize Movement. But expecting adaptations over time.
And can I just say that's the work of Gibson and the ecological psychology people. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Or like sort of springs right from that. Yeah, I'm Bernstein. So yeah, so the mind can understand a concept quickly, but the body learns on its own time and its own way. And every nourishing idea plants seeds and grows roots. And so sometimes all we're doing is planting lots of seeds and knowing that they're going to grow roots and they're going to emerge in the skill when they do. But inspire curiosity, nourish the discernment of sensory experiences, and the results will reveal themselves in surprising ways over time in the way that they do.
Jeremy, the mind, can you put that up again for a sec? The mind can understand a concept rather quickly. The body learns slower. Do you believe that's always the case? Or do you think that that is something that's more of a consequence of the way that we've conceptualized learning in our
I
society?
would word it differently. I would word it differently today. I would say the body learns differently.
Ah,
Because sometimes it can switch, shift from one way of doing something to another way really quickly with the, kind of the right constraint and taking advantage of the seeds that you planted over time. I mean, we just don't know. But yeah, I don't, I think slower doesn't have the right implications. It has a different learning curve, maybe, but I think differently is good enough.
yeah. Yeah, because sometimes the body learns things, well, adapts or learns, however language you want to choose. And we don't really even know what's going on. It just feels better.
Right.
And
Right.
can I add to, oh, go ahead, Camilla, sorry.
Thanks,
I
Jen.
just wanted to add that the mind sometimes thinks it understands, but it doesn't.
Yes.
I am having a feeling that you might want to say that, Susan, because it's in the experientials and what we are talking about constantly. It's not like when you see icosahedron, it's not like you make one, right? Like, oh, I get it, is a bit different than when you build it, and then there is this, oh, I get it, and then there's like multiple, oh, I get it after, and then you just learn there's no way you could have got it everything because there's something new all the time. So
Yeah, because you can learn through your fingertips, right? Without the intermediary of words, without mind. And I also, or what is mind, for that matter, that's a whole other game to play. But with kids with math, tutoring kids who are having early troubles with math is the same. I have them count on their fingers. I teach them different ways to count on their fingers. They're feeling and sensing, or I talk about even numbers in terms of walking, left, right, 1, 2, 1, 2. And sometimes the body is already doing it. We know babies know math when they're born, or very shortly after. There's a whole bunch of math that they're born doing, and then we send them to school and they lose it. But this being able to then articulate what it is you understand, what you've learned through the fingertips, right? Then that can be a slow process too. So I think you're right, Jeremy. I think we have to look at different spectrums and it happening in different ways.
And the whole, go ahead, Camilla.
no, I just wanted to say either way, well done that you are able to name it. It's like so helpful to see it written by words and so inspiring. Thank you for putting the word, not word also, but work. Beautiful work, Jeremy.
Thanks.
I was going to say the same thing. And the fact that the cornerstone, as you called it, to expect adaptation over time without expectation is a really important cornerstone. And it reminds us that we are always self-adapting. And that's just it is the process of life itself. And what happens, like you say, when we take away the loaded base of expectations and the judgment that goes along with it has to be one way, and that does interweave with the other principles that you brought up. And yeah, thank you. This has been an amazing discussion, and I'm really glad we got to the whole set of them, because well, what was it? Number 2, number 1, the whole non-linearity of learning. And the application of these ideas to things that we're all doing. I mean, I'm not a manual therapist, but certainly to movement and to learning in general.
And the way they interlink, I mean, you're with Saiji, you're doing left ward off, right ward off, you're moving slowly, slowly, slowly. Some information is getting in. We never practice, catch the spoon as it's falling off the counter. But that is a consequence. That fast response seems to be a consequence of this very slow practice. What's going on there? There's so much we don't know. That's nonlinear.
Are you going to make these public, these cornerstones? Are you publishing?
I mean, I've sent them out to my email distribution list last summer. I'm happy to share them. I think they're a stepping stone in my journey to understand, and will refine and evolve over time. So I'm not trying to push them into existence exactly. I'm just sort of letting them percolate.
Well, I think they're very worthy of sharing on a massive scale.
Thank you.
Let the University of Miami be very proud of you.
Go Canes.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our meeting. And what I would like to do now is invite everybody to unmute and to bring your last words before we do announcements. Before we do that, I want to thank Jer for this, and Nuno, both of you, for this amazing discussion that wouldn't have necessarily happened with that joint effort and that joint intention. So we really, really appreciate it. As some of you know, I have a ferry to catch after this, so without delay, I'm going to invite everybody else to make a few comments before I give the announcements.
I'm sorry I was late. I was in a Tai Chi class that I had sort of sparked the subject of, so I really didn't feel like I could leave early, but I so much look forward to the replay. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Magnificent.
The body learns differently. I like that a lot.
And what a great combination of you two guys. It's like creme de la creme in English. Like you create something beautiful together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for accepting to show this. Your work and the way you work, for me, you are an inspiration. Really, the way you put yourself out and the way you do the things and the way you just present the things and put things in words. It's inspiring to me. Thank you.
Yes, to me too.
I agree.
Well, thank you for listening and for being here. I didn't know this would be like this. I was sort of beaten and battered in academia, so I don't really have I appreciate your thoughts, and I have learned because of y'all, like this is a product. This is an emergent property of hanging out in a space with everybody here and being a part of the Biotensegrity community. I mean, like it's not just mine. It's with a lot of gratitude, but especially for being so supportive, and I'm touched and grateful. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Nuno, for asking, and thanks for Chris for providing this space.
Okay, Camille, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to say anything? No, you're good. Okay, yeah, thank you all. This to me is a very special space together. I believe that we're creating something that's important, and that is it's a garden for what we can all take out in the world, and it's not a one way. Everybody brings nourishment, everybody takes part, and to me that is very, very special. And it's all of you, it's all of us together that creates this. So I'm ever grateful that you're all here.